Welcome to the Breadwinners Shifting the Hustle series, where we talk about the transformative world of work in the post-pandemic era and how it relates to our work and well-being. I am Rachael Lowell Ellison. In this series, we've covered the 5 big questions that the SHIFT framework poses about the work environment. Security. Do I feel safe? Do I feel emotionally, physically, socially like I can be myself at work? Horizon. Do I have opportunities for growth? Do I see a future here? Impact. Do I understand my why? Why do I do the work I do? And how is my success measured? Fluidity. Do I have room to adapt to the changing work and life demands? Ties. Do I connect with others? Connection and belonging. So that's the model. But before I wrap the series, there's a couple more topics I wanted to cover. And the one we'll cover today is in nearly every business article headline I read. Artificial intelligence. I'd say half of them. It seems to have really just descended upon us. And on top of all the other changes to how we work, we have this big, unwieldy, yet very tangible force in our work system. It's a powerful beast that we're all trying to befriend and tame and leverage. A colleague sent me an article in the New York Times this week about AI that hit home. In the context of painting the picture of how artificial intelligence is impacting our work, authors Anish Raman and Maria Flynn write, circling around this research is the big question emerging across so many conversations about AI and work, namely, what are our core capabilities as humans? If we answer that question from a place of fear about what's left for people in the age of AI, we can end up conceding a diminished view of human capability. Instead, it's critical for us all to start from a place that imagines what's possible for humans in the age of AI. When you do that, you find yourself focusing quickly on people skills that allow us to collaborate and innovate in ways technology can amplify but never replace. And you find yourself, whatever the role or career stage you're in, with agency to better manage this moment of historic change. So that is where I'm coming from with this episode, diving into this moment of historic change. And I wanted to look through the lens of AI at all these human aspects of work that we've been talking about and try to see the path forward. So I called on Drew Fortin. Drew is the founder and CEO of Lever Talent. He's the host of The Lever Show. And his organization helps leaders develop talent strategies that leverage a tech-empowered future. Drew, welcome to the Breadwinners. So excited to have you.
Thanks so much for having me, Rahel.
This is a bonus episode. So we've been talking this season about the shift model, about what it means to feel secure, to feel like we're developing, having impact, having flexibility, and connecting to other people at work. But I wanted to take this opportunity to talk to you about AI, because when we talk about technology in the workplace, this is something that whether or not folks have been able to get their head around workplace flexibility, AI is where they're diving in. It's not just a buzzword, right? It's really reshaping everything about how we work, how we hire, how we interact. So, Drew, I want to hear from you, your perspective on all of this. So we're going to dive into that shortly, but I want to start with this context setting question I've been asking all of our experts. What word or phrase would you use to describe the transformation we've seen in the workplace over the past few years, especially in the context of AI and technology?
The word that comes to mind for me is very simple. to understand, but performance-based is the word that I use. I think coming out of this whole like COVID era and then what has happened with the economy, I feel that we've gone through this kind of cycle of well-being, culture, feelings, family, friends, collaboration. But the brass tacks of all of this is we work to create value in the world. And what I get excited about what the proliferation of AI and other technologies is doing is it's putting the focus back on the individual. And so the way that I am going to perform or show up or be able to perform or my potential of my performance is very different from your potential and your performance. And I think what AI has opened us up to is this another big platform shift that allows us to rethink, what are we doing? What are we measuring? What does performance truly mean? Is performance activity? Or is it something else? And I do think that it's forcing us to rethink it. And I actually think it's going to open the door to us reevaluating what performance actually means.
Yeah, I think that's spot on. And a lot of what we're talking about when we talk about impact, which I know we're going to get. So I want to walk you through the shift model and think about from each of the topics, each of the kind of headlines in that model, what is the role that AI is playing? How is it impacting each of those? So when we think about security, we're really talking about how do we feel, what kind of emotional, psychological safety do we feel in the workplace when we're interacting with each other? Do we have the freedom of expression to be as innovative and as curious as we want to be without fear of repercussions? And then I talk a little bit about financial security being that question of, are you getting paid commensurate with what you are doing? And do you get paid to be able to support your family when they need it? So what do you think about that? What do you see as the relationship between those two things?
Yeah. So first off, we all know that having psychological safety is super important. And back to performance, when we feel safe, we're going to feel much more comfortable about exposing parts of us that we may not be even exposed to all the time. Said differently, when we push ourselves, we sometimes become someone different than we are typically. And when we're not comfortable with that, that can expose us in ways. And so we may not push ourselves to that limit or want to show ourselves in that way. So psychological safety, if we truly want to push the limit and perform. When I think about the way that, AI is impacting security, right? Whether that's equity, whether that's pay and compensation, we want to think about it in the workplace. We should take a step back and think there are not many times in our career when the playing field is going to be almost like reset in a way. And I feel like this big platform shift in AI, we haven't seen since like the digital transformation shift of the early 2000s when e-commerce came on board and everything else. And we all have the opportunity. Everyone's in the same spot right now. Even if you feel like the person next to you is more advanced, I got an AI certification and this person's doing this, it's still so early. And so now is the time to adopt, try things out and learn. I was reading a report the other day. In general, there's like a perception of a 25 to 30% premium being put on roles and employees who have AI experience. Not that many people have AI. I mean, it's been around for a year. What do you call experience? Right. So that is something that I think we can everyone needs to get comfortable with the uncomfortable. And if you can adopt it now and start using it now, the technologies we're using today for AI, I have a hard time believing that 5 years from now, they're going to be the same exact technologies because that never happens. So it's not about hitching your wagon to a special application. It's just learning. It's just trying. It's understanding how this gosh darn new thing works. Right.
Yeah.
And then the other side of this, from like the security component, when we think about like social security, is AI has opened the door to helping us express tonality better, especially in written forms of communication. Right. And I think so. I mean, I think that's another component of this is like there's an emotional aspect here that now we can kind of like all level up our communication game, especially in writing, using technology like AI, which I think will further foster psychological safety, will further foster appreciation, will further foster having tough conversations and all those other components.
Interesting. So I hadn't thought about those things. So what I hear is AI does two things. One, it is resetting the playing field for all of us. And it's a little bit like in order to succeed, in order to adapt, we have to be open and curious and willing to fail and trip up, get tripped up by AI. In other words, like get messy with it, right?
That's absolutely right.
And I didn't think about the tonality piece. That's so interesting because, so much is misinterpreted, as we know, in written communication, where people are overwhelmed, overloaded with these different messages, and the way someone uses a period, the way someone uses. Yeah.
And just like a quick anecdote on that, I was just emailing back and forth with a CEO who's gone through a lot of change this past year, not in a good way. Organization is suffering because of the economy, and they've had to do a couple rounds of layoffs. And we all need to remember we're all humans and we avoid conflict naturally under pressure sometimes. And when things are bad, when times are tough, it's sometimes a coping mechanism to dehumanize. And so naturally things may feel less empathetic, less human.
Right.
Even our communication and style. And so we can leverage, when I bring that up from a tonality standpoint, is some people are naturally good at communicators in written form and some people may not be. But in general, this moment in time, if you're having a tough time as a business, it's hard, right?
Yeah.
To put that thought in, to put that empathy in, because that's naturally not what we're programmed to do. And we're going through hard times.
So true. Yeah. No, I think it really is a gift from so many.
Yeah.
On so many levels for a business to be able to access the tools that are available to them right now, to be able to refine that approach as they navigate some tricky waters. When you talked about resetting the playing field, it kind of sets the stage for a conversation about professional development and career progression. So the word horizon in the model.
Yeah.
So everybody has to be, as you're saying, open to experimentation, getting messy in the world of AI. But it also really transforms how we think about skills, experience, tenure, titles, right? It's for some people who really rely on, I've met some folks over the course of my career who adapting to change was not their favorite thing. And so to be able to, and I've seen a lot of leaders, frankly, who are so reluctant to get on board with even the idea that folks could collaborate and innovate remotely. That this idea that I need to look at my workforce differently based on skills instead of based on the sort of rubric that I've used to evaluate folks in the past. That's huge. So I'm curious to hear, you work with a lot of leaders, to hear what your experience is working with leaders around this, and then how you're seeing individuals adapt as well.
Yeah. So, I mean, ultimately, when you're talking about that, is like old guard, new guard, teaching an old dog new tricks, all these other, sayings that we have, which is like, we have biases and we also develop biases. And one of the most popular ones that has come up because of hybrid work is the notion of like proximity bias, right? And it's like, well, if I don't see the work getting done, or am not in a room with that person all the time, then I don't have this affinity for them. I don't understand how they operate, and that can be difficult, right? And so, which I think is really important. I think relationships, interpersonal, are really important. I think, a lot of the leadership team building work we do, sure, we do virtual calls, but nothing beats doing an offsite in person to do strategic work, regardless whether you're a fully disparate remote company or a hybrid company. the work landscape, I think, is changing in a few ways. I think first off is your notion of going to more of like a skills-based and focus. Like we're not celebrating the certification. We're not necessarily celebrating the credential of I graduated from this college and therefore I'm set on a path. It's really celebrating that you have done something and demonstrated that you have done something. And therefore I have programmed that you have that skill validated. Mm-hmm. AI, and not just AI, I think the transformation, the evolution of technology, not just AI, but we're also seeing it in the early days of like Web3 blockchain technology, is especially Web3 blockchain technology opens the door to ownership of data and encryption of data so that you can, it brings about this notion of what I call portability of data. Mm. Currently, in the current career progression and work landscape, you benefit from being in a specific business, actually, as long as you can, because the way that they measure and credential and validate performance is going to be very different from even the company next door, even if they're competitors in that same role or a career path. And I believe that this leads to career pigeonholing. This leads to somebody not reaching that performance potential that we talked about before. And so I do think that just the pure nature of a huge platform shift like AI, or we talk about Web3 and blockchain, is going to commoditize some of the work that we do. And therefore, just naturally, it begs the question of, well, what is performance, or what do skills look like if I can just learn a skill and AI can do it for me in like a day when it took someone weeks to learn, right? What it's going to do is it's going to force our focus on the things that machines don't do well, the human abilities, creativity, behavior, cognitive ability, systems thinking, relationships, not just between people, but wholly like disparate sets of data that AI would never be able to look at, right? And those become the things that we're now calling skills. Right? Like, of course they're skills, but we used to be like hard skills, soft skills. They're all skills depending on your career and where you're in. I think that there's different levels of that. If you were to look at your baseball player card, your batting average would be different than mine, and they would mean different things because of the role we played on the team. Right. And I think that it's opening the door to that. On the just performance development side of things, AI is opening the door up to, many businesses still have performance appraisal processes, and it's more of an administrative task to get it done for my team members every year than it is actually to think about their career development. And that administrative barrier is so big that it's daunting, and I don't want to do this, and I'm going to do 10 of these over the next 2 weeks, and this is awful, when we can actually use AI now to summarize that for us, to record a professional development call, which means that we can actually focus on you, and talk about you. I also think that 360 reviews, anything that where we're taking human input, we can now use AI to summarize that data, to bring it all together more rapidly. And what that may lead to is we can do the episodes can be shorter. So you could envision where you do performance management on a quarterly basis and you track it because AI can take all the data, right?
Right. That is interesting. I want to pause for our listeners because you and I know 360s very well, and there will be listeners who know exactly what we're talking about. But just to fill folks in, what 360s essentially are comprehensive reviews where data is collected either through an established tool or through interviews or both on someone's performance, typically a leader, but it could be anyone, looking at, how they're doing around different competencies related to leadership. Typically that comes out, what I've produced is a report, kind of a long form report, synthesizing what I've heard, what I've read in the surveys and in the interviews that I've done on a particular leader. And what you're suggesting is that would go a lot quicker for me, which is fantastic. But to be able to access that information quickly, it tends to be something that companies resist doing or might hold off doing unless they feel there's a really strong need, where I think it's such a valuable tool to get those insights on folks at, at different points in their career, maybe multiple times. So to be able to use AI to do that more quickly and efficiently is huge. So just wanted to chime in with that. But yeah.
It also allows us to move downstream. So you were saying, like, typically it's only done at the leadership levels, right? There are lots of performance management processes and leadership development processes that are kept up high, in the hierarchy. And it's mainly because of this, the cost associated with it, the difficulty of deployment, the bang for the buck. And AI can open the door to more real-time valuable feedback.
Mm-hmm.
Imagine a world where there's AI, where you're able to use AI to look at a collection of 360s based off and compare based off of people in roles or people in companies or positions. And now you can easily identify and curate learning paths, right? There's already AI solutions, right? That'll do that. And not just learning paths, but then career paths, right? We do a lot of work with behavior at Lever Talent using various tools. And once you understand someone's behavioral profile, there are jobs I know that I can do, but I'll never be amazing at. Right. And you do learn some of that 360, but if you had 360 and then you had your behavioral data, like, this is what AI is opening the door to. Yeah.
That's true. That's so true. So switching ahead, we've talked about performance and so much to be said in that domain, but really connecting it to impact, right? Because what we're trying to get at with impact is, how do organizations, and some do this as we know better than others, really document what folks are doing to, whether they're using OKRs as typical objectives and key results, or other frameworks to kind of look at how work is getting done. But honestly, often in my experience, in certain sectors, for sure, that doesn't really register quite the same way. It doesn't kind of pop in everyone's heads. So how do you think AI is going to change the documentation of performance and the real measurement of how well are we doing in a way that everyone understands?
It's all about data collection. Mm-hmm. And so a lot of what we do with strategy and OKRs is meetings and discussions.
Mm-hmm.
And those meetings are poorly documented in the past. Mm-hmm. And OKRs is essentially a summary of, we're meeting on a regular basis, we're tracking towards goals and performance. There are oftentimes OKRs that, yes, they drive a business metric, but you can't always measure the business metric to get the OKR done, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so what we're relying on is checks and balances in meetings to be like, did you do these 3 things? Cool, check. Did you do these next 3 things? Great. And we're showing progress on a bar. And that has given birth to a whole category of project management tools.
Right.
Which are essentially just glorified worksheets.
Yeah.
There's not like a whole lot of automation happening in them. Some of them now program into automation, but it literally is a repository for you to document your data. Just like we talked about performance appraisals, what they've done is given us a centralized place in an organized way to look at the data that we have input into it. But it has also exacerbated the administrative nightmare that it is to accomplish these tasks. And I would argue in a lot of these cases, it has now become, like, that's why project management is a function, right? It has now become the thing that you need to do instead of the thing that is going to help you do it. And AI, if AI can record our call, we use a few different performance management products at Lever Talent with our clients. If we can record our call, if we can easily summarize our notes, if we can get those things forward, then it makes it really easy to track progress. And so now we can focus more on what we should do. The other part of this is that AI, if you look at how it's been helpful in roles, is not around telling you what to do, but rapidly giving you more ideas on things you could do. So if you're doing objectives and key results, and like, this is the goal we're trying to do, is you could give me 10 ways, right? 10 strategy ideas to do this, right?
Yeah.
AI is great at that.
True.
So it's continuing the automation of the objective tasks, right? Anything that's like written element, right? That's a transactional work. It's freeing us up to do the more subjective elements.
Right.
And these are back to those relational elements, comparing the data sets, right? I would even argue that OKRs, and when I do team sessions, I talk to leaders about this. I philosophically believe that OKRs in a lot of businesses are just an excuse to maintain command and control versus give more freedom. Because it's like, we're going to mandate this process. This is what we're doing up here. It has to follow this. And it's like, great. But let's actually get our heads out of the weeds of following, like we have to follow this OKR process. And if we actually had clearer mission, vision, and values, and we actually crafted this is where we're going, we wouldn't have to do so much of the OKR work, right?
Yeah.
And AI is going to just free up the administrivia of the notes and communication of it.
So true. I wrote a toolkit at my last organization for HR leaders to talk about how do we document performance and how do we get folks thinking the right way, leaders thinking the right way about it. And it involved this plan and prepare phase where you are looking at your mission and vision and values. I think people do tend to default to these structures, whether it's SMART goals or OKRs or whatever it is, so that they can align things quickly and keep moving, right? But then they find that it's not necessarily hitting the marks, really nailing the content that they want in terms of seeing how the work is working. And because it just almost takes too much forethought. But if they start from that place of really thinking about goals at an organizational level, at a department level, at a team level, at an individual level, and then being able to identify what kind of coaching does someone need to be able to build those, work towards those performance goals. And then to really assess from there, how well have they done that? But I love what you're introducing here about the creativity, the sort of innovative thinking and out of the box thinking. I think sometimes we get folks when they're going through this process because, as you said, there's a lot of administrivia involved and they just get kind of overwhelmed and people start to operate in a rote kind of response to like, okay, now we do the objectives of the key results and then we go.
You get rewarded for following the process. You don't get rewarded for achieving the result.
Exactly. Yes. That is totally true. Yeah. That is totally true. It struck me as you were talking just how crazy it's going to be when we take out all of the kind of heavy, not meaningless lift, but the heavy lift of documenting, and when that's done for us by AI and when we're able to distill a lot of the concrete pieces, are we ready to operate with the soft skills that are needed to navigate these conversations do we need the structure? Yeah. What could we do, I should say, without that structure of the OKR to be able to navigate these conversations?
And that just speaks to evolution. I would call it, you were saying it's heavy structure. It's machinery, and there's a lot of it. I was just chatting with someone this morning. We were having a conversation, and he was like, it's just funny. We're having an argument internally around what an objective is versus a goal. It came down to, well, what is a strategy? Like, they're arguing these like ethereal things because they're getting more obsessed about, am I doing this right? Am I following the OKR? Is there a tried and true? And it's like, you're missing the point.
Yeah. Yeah. No.
Yep.
I think that is really, it's interesting. I think there's so much for folks to be able to get their head around about how everything is changing so dramatically. And it leads us to the topic of fluidity and flexibility. So when we're talking about this, we're talking about, yes, the autonomy, the schedule flexibility that we need, but also this ability to adapt to change and to continue to be open to working differently.
Yep.
So what do you think is the role of AI in that? Is it conceptually, we're seeing this tool and the system that we've never or these series of tools that we've never seen before. And so we have to adapt with it? Or is AI actually helping us make that shift?
AI is naturally helping us make that shift.
Yeah.
AI has been in behind the scenes in the works for the last 15 years, right? And people had been working on it, and now it's reached the point where you can actually use AI to do something, right? And so we're using it from like a large language models and, using it to create human-like content, whether that's graphic design, which is pretty amazing. Use some of the graphic design tools that are out there, or written form. There's now video and some other things that are just being automated, which is fantastic and sometimes a little scary. How amazing, right? A machine can do that. So I think it's only evolving. It's taking away a lot of this transactional work. I call it calendar Tetris that we're all playing. And it depends on what role, but some of us are in, like, if you're a leader of a unit, an executive of a unit, that's your life. It's your calendar, and you're doing calendar Tetris, and you're moving things around. Because
we're on video, listeners, but you won't see the video. But I just had a reaction because I've been talking about, work-life integration for the past 15 years. Tetris is my go-to analogy. I just feel like we're sort of constantly, I know, right? Yeah. It's like, it's so spot on. And now more than ever, I used to think about it in terms of how it applied to our individual lives and obligations, but now it's really this organizational Tetris that we're doing, which is crazy.
And when we think about AI, right, there's the kind of the idea generation element that AI can do again, but it can also trigger reminders at the right time. It can curate experiences. At Lever Talent, we're a partner of the Predictive Index, which has roots in behavioral assessment, but they're releasing a new performance management platform called PI Perform. And it's leveraging, uses AI. You plug in your Slack and everything else, and it'll be like, oh, you and Rachael are meeting. You were talking about this on Slack. Do you want to talk about that? Like, it's curating, prompting, giving the experiences, so we don't have to, like, oh, I forgot to put that thing on our list.
Yeah.
Right?
Interesting.
It's documenting it. It's making it so that we can give each other, kudos based off of, oh, you had this meeting. Why don't you give this person feedback on what they did? Right?
Right.
So it makes it easier to manage the relationships. And therefore, I think it evolves and makes us more comfortable with, some of us more than others still, with this notion of hybrid work. And then more so than ever now, we're hearing more about asynchronous work.
Right.
So you have disparate team on different sides of the globe. And it's like, I'm going to get work done while you're sleeping. And then when you get up, I'm going to be asleep, and I'm going to hand it to you. And it's that much easier now. Right?
Yeah.
So I think that's awesome. It gives a different meaning to, like, globalization and how we think about it.
Absolutely. Interesting. So we've sort of danced around this, and in every one of these categories, we've talked about how folks are coming together, how they're navigating the nuances of tone, of social interactions. But let's talk about this ties piece, right? We're doing another episode on ties specifically, where we're talking about the Surgeon General just came out with a publication about loneliness and belonging, and just the sense of isolation that we're all feeling. And how does AI help us with that, kind of above and beyond what we've already covered, or building on what we've covered?
It's a legit question. So, really what we're talking about is inclusion.
Yeah.
And I felt like during the pandemic, gosh, almost 4 years ago, right? Like, we made some, like, great strides for what does it mean to be inclusive. There was so much happening during that time. Like, there was, like, social unrest, acts of racism happening. And then there's COVID, and people are dying.
Right.
And this, like, opened us up to think about, whoa, we work with these people every day. Like, maybe we should be more accepting of others. We need to help each other grieve. Since then, we wanted the economy to come back so bad, a lot of companies, that they overhired. And so they have these big like DEI efforts and everything else. And then the response, especially in tech, was to do mass layoffs in the latest economic turn, the aftershock coming out of the pandemic years.
Right.
And what it forced people to do is be like, whoa, but I thought we were together on this. I thought I was included.
Right.
I thought we had the social element. And it made us all think like, did my contribution matter? It turned everything that we once thought was like the psychological safety, that did we really have that? Right.
Sure.
It also made us, I think it made us realize as business leaders, even though we want to prioritize being inclusive, that many businesses had not truly connected inclusion to their mission and their vision and their values.
Right.
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 Because the outcome was, well, we just have to make a profit, or they went right down to the bottom line behavior. So I think if we think about where we're at today in many parts of the business world, if I think AI stands to make business more efficient with less.
Mm-hmm.
Some may be like, oh, so you're advocating for less humans, Drew, right?
No.
This is a good thing.
Yeah, I can see how it's a good thing. Yeah, for sure.
Right? It can also be used to enhance the way we do business. It can help us better program our mission, vision, values, and all that we do. It can help us not end up in that world where we overhired. It will help us apply human ingenuity in places we didn't even know before and create more value, right? There's a lot happening in the world today, too, with various global conflicts that are also questioning this, like, how do we feel included? And just like we talked about with whether it's like one-to-one meetings or like there is this need as leaders, the notion of an open door policy implies a responsive nature to making people feel included. My door is always open. You can come in whenever you want. Well, that's great.
Right.
In the office.
Yeah.
But in today's world, the leader needs to be proactive. I'm going to knock on your door. I'm going to check in from time to time. And I need to have those prompts. I need to have those reminders. I need to check in with these people and manage these relationships so much more differently. That I think that the inclusion imperative, if there was something to call it, because it's now proactive versus responsive, does require technology like AI to help us do that better. Yeah.
Interesting. I was talking to a friend in the DEI space recently.
Yeah.
And a stat that I heard recently was that 60% of DEI leaders were laid off over the past couple of years. Like there was a surge in DEIB efforts and then this massive layoff. And it's interesting. I spoke to someone who had created a tool, a piece of content, sort of a series around DEIB. And I was thinking about folks that I've worked with and leaders that I've worked with. And this series was really focused on educating leaders about the realities of racial deeds was one example, right? So where there were deeds that were actually established where people of color couldn't own in a particular neighborhood, right? Letting leaders know that this is a part of our history and reality. And I said, yeah, but what's happening is they might learn. I've seen leaders go to session after session about slavery and the history of minorities in this country, and then not be able to navigate from a tonal perspective ever leading those conversations, just time after time. It wouldn't matter how much education they got. They couldn't figure out how to lead a conversation in a way that was inclusive. So it's interesting to think about AI helping them with that tonal shift. So I don't know, that just came to mind.
Yeah. It's really interesting that you bring that up too, because you need to also think about what the value of that exercise is.
Right.
And what role does having to educate your employees on the history of minorities in this country or racism play in getting work done?
Right.
chances are educating all your leaders so that they can educate their employees on that likely isn't the best use of that versus bringing an expert in to educate everybody. Just makes sense, right? So how do you go from, I know this, so how does that change the way we behave? And that comes down to more like leadership and awareness and perspective and being open to the idea that just because you approach something differently or talk about something differently than I do, I'm a big believer in this. And I've done a lot of ego work with myself over the years. Chances are, if you were given a task and I was given a task, I'm like, oh, this is the way to do it. But the outcome that we have, we're both smart people, would generally be around the same. So I don't need to exert my ego as much on that. And I need to be accepting of the way that you're going to do something. And that just comes down to experience, but it also comes down more to just, I need to be more okay with myself accepting that than you. And I think more attention paid to generating self-awareness and understanding that we can all be great at something, but we can't all be great at everything is just opening the door to that acceptance and inclusion anyways.
Just gave me a brainstorm where I think we should work together to create a tool like a leader translator or something where like an AI tool where leaders have to say like, I'm going to gut check this leadership response. And it kind of
That's an excellent idea.
Steers them in the right direction.
That is a brilliant idea.
I feel like that would be huge. So as we think about organizations who are entering this space, I know organizations that are already using AI and some who are totally terrified. What would you recommend? What's one strategy for the future you would recommend for organizations looking to balance AI with human-centered workplace practices?
Yeah. So I think if we're talking specifically about use of AI in HR, in talent management, I think we only stand to gain. There are already reports that show that leveraging AI at specific points in the hiring journey can lead to better candidate pipelines, can lead to more unbiased hiring. In fact, there was a study out of Australia that showed that folks in minority positions or genders that are not male actually trusted application processes that said they were powered by AI more so than those that didn't. For that reason, because they know inherently, like, I'm going to be judged. So I think AI is going to help us there. We have a learning and development leader in the Lever Talent client community who a lot of HR, just like many other departments, is bootstrapped. And so learning and development, especially, how do we create a course on this? Because it was just thrown to me like we need to develop a competency here. And they're leveraging AI to actually write their course outlines to give them guidance on that. Because all that information is just being farmed, right, from other places. So I think we could say better learning journeys. Just the administrivia of people management. I'm just sick and tired of the term strategic HR. Because what HR leader is like, I'm not strategic. That makes no sense. What they're saying is a lot of HR is administration and regulations and compliance. And there are people that are generally great at that. But what AI is opening the door to is this concept of leapfrogging, which is in HR. HR is probably like, when I first got into HR tech, I was coming from the marketing tech world. And I was like, wow, this is pretty interesting. Like marketing tech first started in digital transformation of marketing. It was like, we just got to collect data. So we put cookies on everything, right? And then we started tracking website traffic and click behavior. We didn't even know what we were doing, right? But then we just started, once you started to collect data, then you start to notice the relationships between the data. And now you're using predictive models to do marketing to target people. HR was probably, and this was, almost 15, 20 years ago, was like 10 years behind marketing technology at that point. And I would say now it's probably about 5 years behind. We are collecting massive amounts of data in our HR systems. Very few of us are able to even to display just the data. AI is allowing us to leapfrog that phase that marketing had to go through of like pulling teeth about creating relationships between the data. AI can allow us to create those relationships. So I think we're also going to see a full category emerge of true like people analytics and measurement software that right now has typically only been like relegated to the enterprise organization. There's
Oh,
technology, but
interesting.
then you need these data scientists, you need a team of IO psychologists to do validity and all this stuff. That's all going to start to come
Sure.
down market thanks to AI allowing us to tie these data sets together without like heavy infrastructure work.
So true. Oh, Drew, this was a joy. Thank you so much
Absolute pleasure to be
for
here,
joining me.
Yeah.
I always say this with my experts because I love talking to them so much, but I'm like, let's do it again. Let's do it again in 3 years and see what we feel about what's changed. Thanks so much. Thank you for joining us on the Breadwinners Navigating the Shift series. For more on how to ride the waves of change and stay ahead in the evolving world of work, make sure to subscribe, listen to past episodes, catch up. There's a lot to learn. You can find us at thebreadwinnerspodcast.com and everywhere podcasts live. If you like what we're up to this season, please leave us a review or email us at thebreadwinnerspodcast@gmail.com. Next, we're going to look back at what we've learned from these conversations and see what we can take forward with us into the great unknown. Until then, stay curious, stay adaptable, and we'll keep moving forward together.
This podcast is part of the Sound Advice FM network. Sound Advice FM, women's voices amplified.